Amendment Bill, third reading.
I call Paul Goldsmith.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Electronic Transactions Contract Formation Amendment Bill be now read a third time. And thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to speak on this, the third reading speech of my member's bill here, a bill over which many words have been spoken. Most of them by me, I'm bound to admit, but nevertheless, clear and predictable laws, Mr. Speaker, governing commerce are some of the foundations on the success of the modern economy upon which our prosperity depends. And so the fundamentals of business haven't changed over the years. Trading is the most natural of all activities of men and women. It's a civilising activity because ultimately you only succeed in business and in trade if you give other people what they want at the price that they want it, otherwise you go out of business. And most of all, trade flourishes in an environment where there's a shared understanding of the rules, and so contract law and contract formation has been fundamental to the progress that we've seen in global terms over the past few centuries, and in particular in this country since its formation. And I trust this bill will go some way to add to that shared understanding on the basis, and on that basis I commend it to the House. Clarity and certainty lead to confidence, Mr. Speaker, and confidence leads to greater investment. And that's why it is so important that this government over the past 6 years has demonstrated stable, predictable government policies that have led to the business confidence levels being so high that we see right now, very high levels of business confidence and commercial confidence, which is buttressing the economy and so important in getting us back into growth and into, because once businesses have confidence, they have the confidence to invest, the confidence to employ and create jobs and grow their businesses. So our laws need to be constantly maintained and adapted to respond to changing technology, and so this law comes into that category. And while I said at the start that in the first reading that on its own this bill is not going to bring about the brighter future to which we all aspire and to which this government is so committed, but it is a small and useful addition to the lattice work of our contract law formation. So this bill tidies up one small area of uncertainty and will go some way to increase the flow of business. And given the prevalence of electronic communications in society today, including email, smartphones and the use of social media, it is useful that the current Act be amended to cover such areas. Now, if we can just drill down, the primary purpose of this legislation is to clarify the legal position on a time in which a contract is formed if the acceptance of the offer is sent by some form of electronic communication. And the bill recognises the need for contractual transactions to join the electronic age. Now, the general rule of contract formation, Mr. Speaker, is that a contract is formed at the time that acceptance of the offer is communicated to the offerer. So when somebody says, yes, I accept the offer, or the offerer and the acceptor shake hands, then the deal is done. However, as we know, and as has been recorded in some of the earlier speeches, but does bear repetition here at this important third reading, that exception to the rule was created for acceptances created by post. And this goes back to the famous case of Adams v. Linsell, 1818. I might trespass. Well, and it's worth just quickly going over the details of that case, just to remind the House. So that case involved two parties in the sale of wool on the 2nd of September. The defendants wrote to the plaintiffs offering to sell certain fleeces of wool, and I'm not pulling the wool over, and required an answer in the course of the post. Now, the defendants misdirected the letter so that the plaintiffs did not receive it until the 5th of September. But in the meantime, the plaintiffs had posted the acceptance on the same day, but it was not received to the 9th of September. Meanwhile, on the 8th of September, the defendants, not having received an answer by the 7th of September, as they expected, sold the wool to somebody else. Now, the defendants argued that there could not have been a binding contract until the answer was actually received. and until then they were free to sell the wool to whoever they wanted. Now, the judge said if that was true, it would be impossible to complete any transactions through the post. If the defendants were not bound by their offer until the answer was received, then the plaintiffs would not be bound until they had received word that the defendants had received their acceptance, and this would go on indefinitely. And so it was considered that the offerers were making the offer to the plaintiffs during every moment that the letter was in the post. Then, when the offeree has placed his acceptance in the post, there is a fictional meeting of minds, and that's the phrase that the judge used, a fictional meeting of minds, which concludes that the offer and gives effect to the acceptance. Now, the problem is, Mr. Speaker, that long-standing rule relating to postal acceptances, started by Adams v. Linsell and enumerated in many other cases and law consequently, is not appropriate to electronic transactions, and this has already been recognised. Now, there's no clear authority yet on by way of email, and the point of this bill is to serve to clarify the law. Now, when we go through the details of how I intended to remedy this in the draft law was by inserting a new section 32A. It may not be the most exciting topic, but it's an important topic. And so I was introducing acceptance 32A, in which said that an offer can be accepted by electronic communications is deemed to be accepted at the time of the receipt of the acceptance by the offerer. I thought that was a rather neat way of getting the idea across, but the Select Committee heard a lot of submissions on this topic, led by Jonathan Young, the MP for New Plymouth, and they thought in their wisdom that it could have been more elegantly handled, and in truth this reflected some of the submissions, and the concern outlined during the course of the Select Committee was that a misapprehension that a hard-wired rule applied, and that the offer could only be deemed accepted electronically only at the time of the receipt. And so the suggestion was, during the Select Committee process, to abandon the Section 32 approach and instead insert a new Section 13A into the Act, which is indeed what was done, which was to make it clear that this was a default rule instead of a rigid approach, from which the parties would be able to contract out if they wanted to. And so we have here Section 11 of the Principal Act, which the Electronic Transactions Act already establishes a time in electronic communication is taken to be received. And so what we have is a new Section 13A for the purpose of the formation of a contract. Acceptance by electronic communication of an offer is taken to be communicated to the offerer at the time determined by Section 11 of the Act. And so I think this is a more elegant way of solving the problem that I set out to solve, to bring clarity to the situation. And as a result, I think we have an effective law which will make a small but important difference. And interestingly, this bill nicely dovetails with my next member's bill in the ballot, which is all about freedom of contract over employment contracts, which fits very much with my principles that people should be able to arrange whatever contracts they want and see them and have them enforced by the courts, which is the very foundation of all our commercial activities. So what we have as a result of the good work of the Select Committee, to which I'm grateful for the efforts of Jonathan Young and my colleagues, we have a facilitative act that ensures that negotiating parties are free to specify their own mutually agreed conventions, but in the absence of that, everybody knows the rules. And so, stepping back from that, I know that this piece of legislation is a modest one, and it only deals with a very small piece of the law which had been somewhat vague, but it's important more in the sense that it is an example of this government's determination to work to ensure that every little piece of the contract law is well tended and kept up to date with changes in technology. And on that basis, I'm thrilled at the broad measure of support that we've had from across the House and many parties, and I commend this bill to the House, and I look forward to the support of other parties. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Claire Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is a